Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're speaking now as, if I understand it right, Representative Umberg, that we have all these salaried positions, we have X number of dollars a bottom line. And we're saying, or we're proposing at this point in time, if the sheriff needs monies from different salary lines to pay other salary lines, as long as he doesn't exceed his salary total, that he's free to do it. As the same as in the nursing home, there's a bunch of hourly people, but their salaries, they have the same. If that's what you're saying, I'm in agreement with what you're saying.
I mean, obviously that's a call of the commissioners, but that would certainly be a recommendation, I think, from our subcommittee to them.
And then it would behoove the department head then to break that out before we get to next year, so we don't have the simple item of let's cut out $10,000 out here because we didn't use it. So it would appear to me it's going to make a department head life easier. They're not going to have to bother the commissioners, who I think love to be talked to on a regular basis. But it's not going to bother them from having to do this action. But it's going to be an extra step for the department heads to make sure that that's realigned for next year, so we know what happens.
And may I? I would also, I agree, and I think most importantly, that we should be kept in the loop so that we know it's happening, so that when it comes to budget time, we are aware of the problems that existed in the previous budget, and so we can know how to handle the budget at that time.
So should we ask the department heads to tell us what salaries they want to include in this? Should we ask the department heads to do that? Or should Kathy make the decision as to which ones are included?
Oh, you mean to compress it?
No, not to compress it, but to say this group of salaries are exempt from having to come to the commissioners as long as we stay within the bottom line. Frank, you're shaking your head.
I disagree with that. In the first place, on all of the department's budgets, you don't have just one place for a salary. It's broken down into administrative people, deputies, special deputies, etc. The same thing at the county jail, same thing with the nurses. So it's already broken down into minute details of these salaries. So to exempt the particular line of salaries or whatever, I don't go along with that. I think it's broken down enough already.
No, Frank, we're not asking it to be broken down anymore. What we're saying is that the department head has the authority within those salaries to move the dollars as he or she needs to without the approval of the commissioners. So that in the sheriff's case, because special deputies are there, and have overspent, but his salary line for deputies is underspent, and so he just needs to come and say to the commissioners, I've overspent on special deputies, and the reason I did is because I'm underspent on the secretarial line. And in the nursing home, you could, I don't know, whatever, you could.
May I,
Sure.
Before I would make anything exempt, that's a slippery slope. What I would do is I would combine those two line items, get rid of one of the line items, combine special deputies with the salaries of deputies. That way he can move them around anywhere he wants.
It's not a bad idea, right? Although, for planning purposes,
Yeah, that's not good.
for planning purposes, it would be more difficult because typically people want to know how many full-timers you got, how many part-timers. That's definitely a controlling issue in every discussion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I would agree. I think simpler is better. If you get down to the salary line and you have all the detail on it, but basically we're asking you to manage the salary lines, but they're really a subset of the salary line. So, in the interest of simplicity, and I don't think it affects anything, and I think we ought to manage to that line. Point two, in the very large corporation that I worked for 35 years on the budget side, and when you got into the line breakdown as a department head, and I was one, we were required to every month provide an exception report to any line item where we exceeded by a plus or minus certain variance, which was usually 10% of the monthly budget. That in turn became an addendum to the budget on the following month, so my boss clearly knew what happened and why. If he chose to do anything about it, it was up to him. Of course, accountability for the budget ultimately was mine, but no one was into the dark as to why I exceeded a particular, you know. And also, I think just as important is when you go negative. You know, when you underspend a line item by 40% in a month, that should raise some eyebrows also. That's basically saying, don't reward someone for underspending. The question is, what happened this month? So we used to use, and it was easy, if you had 40 line items, basically, what are you going to do this on? If you come to an agreement on a percent variance, maybe you'll be preparing a report on 1 or 2 lines, at best. You send it off to the commissioners, or the commissioners in turn want to give it to the delegation. Yeah, you can easily find out what happened. It's easy, it's simple, it's not complex, and maybe it's something you ought to consider.
Nice thought.
May I?
Sure.
Right now, as the rules, the regulations, and the laws stand, the county commissioners do not have to get the permission of the delegation to move appropriations. However, the department heads have to get permission from the commissioners to move appropriations from line item to line item within their own budget. They can't go interdepartmentally. With that said, I don't see the problem with the sheriff, and he doesn't have to come to a delegation meeting. I don't see the problem with the sheriff going down into Commissioner Solomon's office and saying, hey, look, I got a little problem. I need to move some money from special details over to salaries, or vice versa, or whatever it is. Would you talk to the other commissioners, and I'll give you more information if you need it, and get me permission to do that? What's the big deal?
If I might. Oh, I'm in charge, I forgot. The problem with that is whether or not you physically want to make the adjustment to the budget, okay?
Well, we always have. That's why this year, special details is only $10,000. Last year it was 75 or 80.
Okay, but if, for example, if special details now is at, I don't know, whatever the amount is, okay?
10,000.
That was what was budgeted.
Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
But I don't know what was spent, and it doesn't matter. And so what I think that what Commissioner's saying and what the sheriff is saying is that I don't want to reduce my salary line for deputies because I hope to have the positions filled. And so if come January, if we see the deputy line going from whatever it is here, from 184,000, and that's what was spent, down, and the special deputies switching around, that it becomes a target for the unknowing, okay? So that when we come to the delegation with the sheriff's budget and we say, last year's special deputies was 130,000 and deputies were, 220,000, but next year we need to change that, I think that becomes a target of opportunity that we may not want to have occur.
May I?
Sure.
I think that's the whole purpose of your positions here as subcommittee, is to be the ones who go to the larger delegation and explain what the changes are and why there were changes in the budgets of the previous year.
So, I'm trying to get a feel for what we want to do here, so that we are all of the understanding. Either A, we're going to actually move the lines, or B, we're not. We're either gonna move the line, either gonna move the money among the salary lines, or we're not. And that's what, okay, I think that some of us are of the opinion we should not, and that we should allow the department heads to do it within themselves. And some of us are of the opinion that we should in fact adjust the budget line item. So those are the, and as I'm hearing from the commissioners, I realize this is not an official meeting and you're not making a decision, but their position would be let the salaries float where they needed to float.
May I believe that the law is already written. There are state laws, RSAs, there are resolutions that the county commissioners have promulgated and expect people to follow. And we're here sitting and saying, well, do they have to follow it? The laws are already there. I don't see where the big deal is for the sheriff to go and say, look, I got to move this because this reason. And we, as the committee, he talks to us about it at budget time. We understand it. We talk to the delegation and say, okay, he moved money because he was missing a deputy. But now he's got a deputy to fill that spot. He needs that money back. We're not idiots. We'll put the money back where it's supposed to be.
If I could, I will ask the commissioners to bring this up at their next meeting, to come to grips with what the commissioners want to do with the salary lines.
May I just point out something? We had a similar issue right here a few hours ago, seems an hour ago, whatever, with the attorney who was wanted to move. We moved some money from the attorney who was no longer there.
But you weren't.
But we were merely telling you about it.
Yeah. But you weren't moving. You were moving money from one line, from one account,
yes,
to a different account. And what we're saying is,
it's not a different account. But
well, it was civil, whatever
I
it was.
I see. You're talking about where the money was coming from.
Yeah, you were moving it from civil whatever,
yes, okay,
up to salaries.
You're right. Absolutely.
Okay, as opposed to
You're right.
within salaries. So it's a totally different thing. So go ahead. I'm not sure that we need to continue discussing this.
Well, I'm just wondering if between the four of us, we could reach a consensus on that. I know Frank's not in favor of that. I am. I'm wondering if it'd be a benefit for us just to have that discussion between the four of us when you're making a recommendation, unless you want to leave it out. I think that's why we're here.
May I just add finally that if you look at these state statutes, the definition of an appropriation is the authority to spend an amount of money for a very specific purpose, and it is synonymous with a line item. The sheriff has the authority right now to move money any way he wants within a line item. But if he has to move it from one line item to another, he has to get permission, and I think it ought to stay that way. That's the resolution that the county commissioners promulgated, and it should stay that way. And I don't care what the line item is. If he moves it from one line item to another, he's got to get permission to do it.
Excuse me. I would like to make this recommendation from the subcommittee, and then we can take a vote on it, okay? That I would recommend that the commissioners revisit the salary component of the budget and determine whether or not they want actual